had a great conversation with Effie Argyropoulos of Digital Public Square. She goes into detail around research on substance use in the labor-intensive industries such as construction, trades, and others. I would like to welcome her today to the podcast, but I'd like to also remind you that if you're struggling with substances, you are not alone. Please reach out to someone trusted. Reach out to me. My number's on the website, Guy Felicella. I will link to him below. And I do something in this podcast I thought I never would, revealing something private but important to debunk a myth. I'm proud today to introduce Effie Argyropoulos of Digital Public Square to Rachel Thexton Connects. So today on the episode, we have a guest with us who is going to discuss a very timely topic, one in which I wish we didn't have to discuss so often, but we absolutely must. And I would like to welcome to Rachel Thexton Connects, Effie Argyropoulos, and she is the project manager of Level Up. Level Up is a digital tool developed by Digital Public Square, based in Toronto, a national nonprofit organization. Effie, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Of course. It's I have full disclaimer. I am doing some public relations work for Effie and her team, building awareness. We're collaborating, working to build awareness for the Level Up tool. So I just wanted to mention that. But I still really felt like this was an important piece of content for the podcast to share with everyone. And I think you'll understand why when we go through some of this content. So Effie, I just wanted to, start off by, letting you know that it's an honor to have you here. I think the work that you do is absolutely amazing. I know that people working for organizations that are nonprofits and, led by causes like this are not, making $5 billion a year. And you do this because you want to. And so I really do appreciate the work that you do. And so thank you for being here and chatting with me and taking the time.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rachel. We're so excited to be here. And it's been so great working with you throughout.
Yes, it's been enjoyable in the sense that, at least we're taking action, right? It's a topic that's not positive, but I'm sure you feel the same way when you get to work, is that taking action on a topic and an issue that absolutely must be acted on.
Absolutely.
So, Digital Public Square. I think that probably is a name that people associate with different things. It is an organization that you work for. Your team does a variety of important work. On the website, it says that you, and this is part of the quote from the website, that you rebuild relationships with the digital spaces that we rely on. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means and the work that the organization does?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring it up. We get asked this a lot, and really when it comes to it is that digital spaces have become a major source of information, a major source of social connection, support services for people who are seeking social impact, social justice. We've seen those spaces increasingly feel less safe or maybe less trustworthy. That could be due to a number of things. That's the impacts of misinformation. That's echo chambers we all get funneled into, maybe the commodification of attention or data, and so much more, really. What we seek to do is build out tools that put the person before the product. We prioritize well-researched information, accessible language, and privacy. And we kind of put that into experiences that are engaging and respectful of people's time and ultimately their interest. It's a saturated information ecosystem. There's a lot of different tidbits fighting for people's attention. In the case of our most recent work, these types of platforms allow participants to anonymously engage with information. So that could be related to sensitive topics, policy issues, while still protecting users from negative repercussions and also decreasing barriers to participation rooted in discrimination or stigma. So all that to say, in sum, digital spaces are important for social impact. those spaces don't always feel so great, we try to make those spaces feel a little bit better.
Okay, so yeah, safety and privacy online, especially with such a large stigma associated with the challenges around substance use. What can you say about privacy to those who maybe, as we get further into this discussion, want to use Level Up or another one of the digital tools that you provide, and they're concerned about their privacy?
So all of our products created here at DPS take a privacy by default approach. We never collect any personally identifiable information. We never ask users to disclose personally identifiable information. Limiting collection of data includes IP addresses, which can end up limiting our ability to use easier methods to reach our audiences, but we see that as a shortcoming that we're willing to take simply because it's so important that people feel safe engaging with information. So ultimately what that means is, yes, we collect a whole host of data in an aggregate format, but none of it can be traced back to the individual. So insights that could be drawn from those aggregate data insights might benefit things at a more structural level without compromising anyone's privacy, without needing anyone to download an app or have this associated with their work login or email or anything of the like.
Yeah, I think not having to download an app is a huge thing, because that would be, I know, especially with cultural components involved, people who are even potentially hiding challenges from those they're living with. They are just so concerned with that getting out, and there is such a strong stigma. It is not right, but it's very much there. So it's great to hear that that's a priority for you.
Absolutely. And we have to think too about low connectivity environments across Canada. I'll share a little bit about our program in a bit, but what we'll see is that our audience members very much so might find themselves in very remote, potentially low internet connectivity environments. And we strive to make products that don't require a lot of internet, or maybe don't see that as a barrier. So that is a very intentional choice.
I just want to kind of build a context of who you are, Effie, before we get into Level Up, which is a very, very interesting tool. But can you talk a bit about your journey and kind of how you landed with Digital Public Square? This is using technology. You're looking at, causes and issues that are happening around you that require action. Did you always know you wanted to work in this space? Tell us a bit about your journey?
Yeah, I think public health is fascinating. I think public health topics are fascinating. Really, I think everything about our world and lives relates to public health. So that's what I did. That's where my studies took me, and I ended up working for a number of years overseas in local government public health contexts. And that ranged in a variety of topics, from vaccines to food insecurity to well-being. The list kind of goes on. But I had an eagerness to work in nonprofit. I wanted to see what that environment was like when working through difficult public health topics. And so the opportunity with DPS came up as I was making my move back to Canada, and it was a great fit. I was able to apply my public health skills in a new space that really did seek to communicate public health messaging in an innovative way to counter potentially harmful narratives online.
Okay. So where were you when you were overseas?
I was working in local government in the UK, specifically in North London.
Oh, interesting.
Fascinating. And it's work I absolutely loved. And because of my love for it, I wanted to take it a step further and better understand how similar concepts could be applied with different structures around them.
Okay. So then we are at Level Up, and you are the project manager. Is this a cause that, I don't know how things work within the organization, but was this something that you really kind of put your hand up and said, I want to be a part of this, I want to lead this, or, how did you become, really the one of the champions for Level Up?
Yeah, this is a worsening issue. We are a grant-funded organization. We are fortunate in the case of this program to be funded by Health Canada's Substance Use and Addictions Program. And we were really enthusiastic about bidding for funding in this space when we did see that call for applications come in. And so kind of leading the public health pillar at Digital Public Square, it was an easy fit for me, especially in the space of creating something that's accessible and engaging and privacy protected. It was a sort of a no-brainer that it would be well suited for this audience who notably has reservations about seeking help.
So to set the stage, I realize here that I'm assuming all the listeners know things that they may not. So we're talking here in Level Up about a digital tool that Effie's about to tell us about and explain. And this is really completely related to substance use, specifically opioid and other substances within the trade and labor-intensive industries. A lot of harms there. You can speak to that, but tell us about Level Up. What is it? How did it come about? And what are the goals for the digital tool of Level Up?
Level Up Canada, which is accessible at levelupcanada.com, is a digital tool, and it raises awareness about the worsening toxic drug supply crisis and its associated opioid and substance-related harms. And it also offers resources to help support different pathways to recovery. That's available in both English and French. This tool, like you alluded to, Rachel, specifically focuses on men working in labor-intensive industries due to the disproportionate impact of opioid and other substance harms on men in trades. For folks that may not know this, we have an average of 21 to 22 opioid-related deaths per day in Canada. 75% of those are men, and of those employed at the time of their death, between 30 and 50% are working in some kind of labor-intensive industry. So very harrowing numbers that don't even begin to scratch the real devastation of the situation. Mm-hmm. Embedded within Level Up is a Find Support service directory, and that aims to provide a centralized place to list all harm reduction and withdrawal management and treatment services, specifically across Ontario, Alberta, and British Columbia. Those are the three provinces with a hugely disproportionate prevalence of this issue. Like I mentioned,
quite shocking stats.
They really are. They really are. I mentioned before, we developed this through a SUOP grant in partnership with people with lived and living experience. So what that meant, inclusive product development process, whereby from early conception, we bring people with lived experience and industry experience into the conversation. We conduct our own primary research with these audiences. We learn a little bit more. We have them engaged in very early prototype versions of our intervention and create that feedback mechanism, that trust, so that their voices can be reflected throughout the process, not just at the end, like a tick box exercise. But the goals that we're really trying to reach, I mean, we have our overarching goal. We want to help reduce opioid and substance-related harms in men working in labor-intensive industries. But through our conversations with people with lived and living experience, we distilled down how we might begin to contribute to that solution. The goals we strive to see through the engagement with the tool are that greater recognition of the incidence of harms, improved awareness of support services, and increased knowledge of peer support strategies. So having the confidence and the skills to know how you might broach a difficult conversation when you notice someone struggling, with the view that all of these outputs would bring about the desired shifts we'd like to see. So that would include things like increased use, intent to access support services, increased confidence in peer support, and over time, through those aggregate data insights that I was alluding to, healthier workplace policies and practices. You know, when we look at aggregate data insights that are totally privacy protected, we can start to see trends in unique audiences. And that's where human resources support can come in. That's where health promotion support can come in. That's where service provision can come in. So really, this tool has both an individualistic awareness raising component, and it also has a more structural, strategic potential with the data insights that the engagements can yield.
Okay. So one of the pieces that really stood out to me, well, a couple of them. So the tool as it stands today, and I know it continues to evolve and you continue to research and add to this, which is fantastic. The most comprehensive collective of national resources for harm reduction and recovery options in those key provinces where you're seeing the most harms amongst men in these industries. I would think that would be valuable. I know that a lot of people, when they're in that spot, even if they've told everyone they know, no one really knows where to turn. And they go to one place, they go to another place. It's not, so having options and having that comprehensive directory, I imagine, would be really incredibly valuable to someone who needs it and wants it.
That's right. We want to encourage people to help make the healthiest choice for them the easiest choice. And that's difficult to do when information's really fragmented.
Okay. So some of the, I know that you did a lot of research leading up to this, some focus groups and others. As you were doing this, what were kind of some of the most surprising findings? And I know all of this is, privacy protected, but obviously the data amongst people that you don't know and we don't know, but they're somewhere out there and they're struggling, or someone they know is struggling. What were a couple of the most surprising pieces of research or data that you gathered during your preparation to launch this tool?
Well, maybe it wasn't exclusively surprising, but something that was really noteworthy was that 76% of labor-intensive workers in a survey that we conducted with 700 labor-intensive workers across Canada said they would worry about losing their job if they needed to get help for substance use. But on the flip, only 37% indicated that they would feel comfortable talking to their employer. So that to us signaled quite a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But on the flip, we heard really powerful statements from industry people with lived and living experience through a series of focus groups that followed this survey, who signaled to the potential for positive impact industry employers could have on this issue. One focus group participant had said, I haven't found an employer or a person out there who isn't open arms to me in my recovery. No one has shut the door on me. Went on to give some examples and then ended with saying the support is unbelievable. And I like to come back to that quote because in a space riddled with stigma and isolation and challenges, seeing the optimism in a statement like that really does offer us some hope for potential. And it really does signal the influence and impact that employers in the industry can stand to have on this issue.
Yeah, I've always kind of felt like those who are working at head office in the corporate space should have much more involvement in this. I know this is a little bit off the pathway, but these, especially in the trade and construction space, building commercial or residential across Canada, it's often, the construction team, a contractor or contractors, but, I don't see a lot of presence of this discussion within, the white collar corporate boardrooms. It seems to be a real taboo topic. And that's why I came out with my story of substance use challenges in 2016. And I think that that's a problem. And I hope that that changes, because as you're saying, this is, 76% are not comfortable, or sorry, 76% would fear retribution. So it's termination, or perhaps being, judged, or maybe demoted or not promoted, or who knows, a variety of those or all of those. And, once I believe that once the senior level corporate culture becomes involved in that and they are invested authentically in that, that can also change things. What are your thoughts on that? I know that's kind of a bit off of what we were discussing, but.
No, I think it's absolutely the case. And I've been really pleasantly encouraged to see a lot of industry stakeholders and leaders in this space are taking this seriously. I think we have a ways to go.
Good.
But when we start to have conversations, you really do see the passion that a lot of folks have for this. And that in itself is a hugely powerful thing. We want to tackle problems upstream. We want to make sure we have buy-in from the people that hold more power. And we're only going to do that if we think about those that oversee how things are done. I can't speak to all employers. And of course, the handful of folks that have been so engaged with Level Up to date are perhaps a minority, but I hope in time as we continue raising awareness about this issue that will shift.
Yes, there's I think it is slowly shifting. I think it needs to shift faster given the severity, but yes, it is slowly shifting. I agree. And hopefully intensifies. Your organization is based in Toronto. In Vancouver, people tend to have, I'm from the Toronto area in Ontario. So I can't say that I'm a Vancouver native. I don't have that same line of thinking, but, there tends to be this thinking that, Toronto believes they're the center of the country and they don't really think about, they call us in the wrong time zone, or they invite us to an event that's, in Toronto when we live in Vancouver, whatever it may be. But I've noticed that your organization takes, a very authentic and genuine interest in the regions, and actually being, hyper local in reaching those in a way that resonates with the regions, which I think is absolutely vital. As a Toronto focused organization, was this something that you consciously kind of discussed as a team, or it just came naturally, we need to really ensure that these regions are, treated differently as they are? It's a big country and we have different cultures, diversities in each market, et cetera.
It's such a good question, Rachel. And, we really prioritize that relationship building across Canada. And that's not unique to this program. That's a standard in all of our Canadian work, and all of our Canadian work has a national focus. Similarly, we've worked internationally. So the concept of connecting with local subject matter experts, connecting with local focused users or audience members, that is a reality that is very familiar to us and very important to us. Involving thought leaders into our process early, usually before we even have an idea what the intervention looks like, is critical. And we've seen time again how much of an impact that has. We also see through those interactions that regional nuances emerge, sometimes in a big way, sometimes less. And that's a really important thing we need to factor in when we build our tools. In Level Up, we make sure to nod to those regional differences. A really straightforward one is the difference in naloxone administration in Ontario versus BC. It's important that we don't inadvertently disseminate information that isn't going to be relevant to a big pocket of our target audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a good point. You in Ontario, you're using the nose spray.
Exactly.
Yeah, which I don't know why we're not using that here, because I think it would be an easier way to administer. It can be quite intimidating to use a needle in the muscle.
Absolutely. I think there's a whole range of complexities there. But the main purpose is whatever exists, we want to make sure people are accessing the right information. Anything less will erode trust and make it. Yeah.
No, you're right. And to be fair, I think, when you're in that moment and you need to actually save someone's life, giving them a shot in the leg is really not on your mind. Your mind is, this person is I'm losing this person, or I could be losing this person. And I need to do whatever I can to save them. So that's fantastic that it's separated by region, depending on a whole load of factors that are different. We are
Totally.
such a huge nation with such differences. So to recognize those is definitely vital. Yeah, when you told me about Level Up, I was very much interested. I've specialized in the real estate space, real estate developers as clients, as well as organizations and associations, and also my own lived experience. But I know that the tool continues to evolve. And there are, I know that, I won't speak to the specifics now because they're in the process of being worked on, but I know that you're working on different information gathering and research, and with a variety of folks as we speak. Is there anything you can tell us about the evolution of Level Up since it launched very recently in kind of spring, summer of 2024?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things we do constantly is optimize the tool, and that just means make modifications to it where we have an indication that a modification could make it more relevant, usable, anything. We base that off of engagement data, so real time, how people are interacting with the experience, and also feedback from our thought leaders and other stakeholders in this space. We often might get comments from folks working in the harm reduction space, and we can make those modifications into the tool in real time and see how they perform. We've kind of talked about how right now the tool covers those 3 provinces, Ontario, Alberta, and British Columbia. We'd love to see this expanded to more Canadian provinces and territories. We'd also love to see this rolled out in industry and other training contexts, like maybe colleges, other trades programs, so that folks actually entering the labor intensive workforce can raise their awareness about this issue early in their journeys. That's that whole prevention angle, and in turn actually be aware of existing resources and strategies if they end up encountering someone they know, or for their own selves, if they might be struggling. We never want to make the assumption that information alone can help a complex need, but information can be a really powerful tool in the prevention space.
Yeah, it can be. And also just knowing that, that tool is there, meaning that we see you, we know that you're struggling, tells that individual, I'm not the only one,
Totally.
they're not making a tool for one person.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that alone is encouraging, I would imagine, to someone who, sees it, recognizes that this is a widespread challenge for those in those industries. So super
Absolutely.
vital.
And I think, part of our work in this space is incorporating different components that are going to help people leave the experience with that exact sentiment you're detailing, Rachel. We've been so fortunate to work with people with lived and living experience who have sat and spoken to us at length in videos, and we're in the process of looking into how we can incorporate that either adjacent to Level Up or within the tool itself, because we feel the power of someone else's lived experience is just so strong that it's something I myself and all my colleagues alike would love to see sitting adjacent to this whole initiative.
Yeah, what a great idea.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say about this whole space is that, of course, we're seeing housing shortages, we're seeing building booms, we're seeing growing populations, and ultimately shortages of skilled trades workers. All of these factors we know put pressure on laborers. So now more than ever, as that sector grows to respond to that increasing need, we want to be able to catch people early before a problem emerges or gets worse. To date, we've had over 1,500 labor-intensive workers confirmed engaged with Level Up, and it's just been a few months. We actually estimate this real number to be much higher, but it would be great to see that number increasing tenfold in accordance with that increasing sector.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm I'm absolutely confident that it will. It is a fantastic tool. And I say that not because I've worked with Effie, but because because this is so close to me, I wouldn't, I'd be honest about what I felt about it, and I would provide feedback, as I think I have before on questions you've asked me. So it's something worth looking at, and it's a really, really smart concept. So I encourage you to have a look at it. And can you just mention the website one more time before we move forward?
Absolutely. It's levelupcanada.com.
Okay.
So you can access that from any device. And to your point, Rachel, I can't stress enough how much we encourage feedback. We are constantly, like I mentioned, optimizing this tool. We are constantly looking at tweaks we can do to make it better, big or small. And we're not interested in creating something in a silo. If folks have good information, better information that would benefit the growth and optimization of this tool, let us know. Let's work together. Let's make it relevant for your needs. Because at the end of the day, that's what's important, that this reaches the people that could stand to benefit from it in a way that resonates with them.
Okay, I want to ask you something about, substance use and the ways in which I don't want to say address it, the way in which we move forward with supporting people with whether they're ready to look at recovery and detox options or whether they require harm reduction. You really cannot, each individual has their own path, as you well know. And so it's important that we look at it that way, but it has become a political issue. There's a huge division, people who feel as though, there's a lot of judgment, a lot of stigma, a lot of stereotypes, a lot of discussion around, forced treatment and other things, closings of, safe injection and use sites that are vital to saving lives in Vancouver and probably across Canada. And just kind of this wave that seems to be coming to shore that is, I feel like, bringing us back a few steps. I know that the government has been incredibly supportive of this platform and that they have, invested in it, and that is important. It's vital. That is something to be respected. The media agenda, whether that be associated with politics or not, it really isn't a political issue. It's a health issue. It's a human issue. It's a we're losing lives issue. Any thoughts on how we can break down these stigmas? I don't think having, political debate is really, all that helpful, although I see it happening all the time and it breaks my heart. But these stigmas that are deadly, they leave people so ashamed that they won't even tell, their closest friend that they're struggling, whether they're ready to get well or get healthy, if they've gotten to a point where they're unwell or not. And I ask guests this who are associated in any way with substance use related content this question, and it's a really hard one to answer, so I don't expect an answer that's going to be, if you have the answer, Effie, you're going to be on the evening news tonight. But I'd love your ideas on breaking down these stigmas and stereotypes, because I've had a guest, Guy Felicello, say that the stigma is just as deadly as the drugs themselves. These people alone and isolated, which in turn can leave them passing and leaving us.
Totally. And I think what you've just highlighted is that the intricate link between mental health and substance use. We cannot segment the two. We cannot talk about one without talking about the other. I don't know if I have the answer, but I just kind of, to your first point in this question, it is very unfortunate how politicized this issue has become, because it totally detracts from the work that needs to be done and casts doubt on the amazing work that's being done by a wide range of community service providers. I think that the fact this issue has become politicized speaks to a broad lack of understanding and barriers to even discussing the issue, not just by those that are more disproportionately impacted, but by those making decisions, by those in totally separate spaces. So it's important on an issue like this or any other that policy decisions are data-driven always. And unfortunately, some of the recent decisions have not reflected the latest evidence. So when we talk about stigma, our research has highlighted the ongoing barriers imposed by stigma in the workplace. We've seen how employers and colleagues can have a role to play in breaking down those barriers if we can empower them with the knowledge to know when to spot a problem and how to broach it, and the knowledge to spot a problem and know what resources exist, and the confidence to be able to have a difficult conversation. So there is an opportunity there to make a positive shift. If we can deliver information confidentially and rapidly and empower people with that confidence, we really stand to create an environment that's more supportive, more understanding, and less conducive to the proliferation of stigma. It's a process. It is not a light switch solution. But it's something we have to tackle, even if it's slow. One of the ways we're trying to engage, we talked a little bit about employers already and the role they have, especially being stakeholders that are more upstream. We have developed toolkits for employers in this space who might want to disseminate Level Up, who might want to learn a little bit more, who might want the language to be able to share it with their workforce. We want to make it as easy as possible for folks to bring this conversation into their workforces so that we can slowly start to dismantle that stigma.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to approach it. Thank you for addressing it. I know it's not an easy issue. I'm going to do something that I might edit out because it might terrify me when I realize I've done it, but I'm going to just pull this out. This is my Suboxone. And so I have been off of opioids for, well, since I had my children, so almost 7 years. And I take Suboxone daily. Suboxone does not give any euphoria. I don't have any type of euphoric feeling from this medication. This is the kind of misunderstanding or lack of information that I think people might have with some of the harm reduction methods. That's why I talk about it. And I am raising my 3 beautiful, lovely children. One who has ADHD and requires some extra work, but is extra smart and extra amazing. And run a successful business and, have conversations with amazing people like you, Effie. And this is a medication that I take every day. It does not affect the way I think. It does not affect the way I feel. Sometimes it will make me a little bit sleepy, so I'll wait till night to take it. But there's no euphoric effect with it. It simply helps me in blocking receptors in my brain that works for me and has actually probably saved my life. I stopped using substances when the illicit market really kind of started to be, an issue in this country. So that is one piece of information that I really think is important, that not all harm reduction medications or methods are providing people with highs or euphorias.
Of course.
And also people who are using are often just trying to keep away the sickness. They're not having fun anymore. They're not in a euphoric state anymore. That's long gone.
Of course.
So another piece of misinformation.
And I think what you're absolutely right, Rachel, and it's so important to talk about and so admirable to talk about. And the more we can, again, come back to the evidence, come back to what is real, in the space of harm reduction, we know, at least in Toronto, drug-related deaths dropped by 67% in neighborhoods that had an active safe consumption site. That is hard facts. That is undisputable. And the more we can make this known, the more we can counter harmful, incorrect narratives. the better off we can be, the more we can combat the stigma.
Yeah, having the discussions, I wish people would ask more questions and to those who know. And I certainly don't know. I only know what I know in my experience, but other people have so much information to share, and I learn from them, and we all need to learn from each other on this one, I think.
Totally.
One thing I wanted to touch on a little bit here, just a few more questions for you, Effie, is I know in the development research, some of it that you shared with me, you've spoken with some Indigenous folks around, their feedback and experience in the trades and labor-intensive industry. Can you speak just briefly to that and why that was important to your team?
Absolutely. Well, we know Indigenous peoples are overrepresented in the toxic drug supply crisis. CBC just came out with an article around First Nations people continuing to die from toxic drugs at a higher rate than non-First Nations people in British Columbia. That was in the first 6 months of 2023. First Nations people in general die at 6 times the rate of non-First Nations people. And in our own research with Indigenous industry workers, we heard some really interesting feedback and noticed a much higher level of general awareness and understanding from this group, but the calls to action were much stronger. So we saw that opioid use seemed to be much more prevalent in the workplaces of Indigenous men. Perhaps that was through some qualitative focus groups where they were able to speak to it more, and in their lives more generally. And a few Indigenous men even mentioned having to deal with racism and ignorance on the job, which only further compounds issues of stigma and isolation. And people we heard from in those focus groups really expressed the urgency of searching for better solutions. So we hope our efforts can play one small part in this by raising awareness and signposting to supports. Of course, DPS is an organization where we do strive to meet the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action number 92. We'd like to think our work in digital spaces could give new opportunities to recognize Indigenous wisdom, and we've certainly incorporated that into programs and products we've developed in the past. But in our pursuit to help build healthy communities, we can only do so by bringing everyone's voice to the table, especially folks who are disproportionately impacted by this crisis.
Yeah, no, I thought that was so vital. I know from working with Indigenous clients and having guests on, friends and colleagues from various nations in British Columbia, that Indigenous people often feel like others are speaking for them on issues that affect them. So hearing directly from them is vital, and the fact that you're doing that is key. So thank you. And I'm non-Indigenous, but from a non-Indigenous person who cares about that, thank you. Important. What has been the most fulfilling part of working on this project, or others? But I imagine Level Up is really front and center in your mind right now.
Yeah, it's so much of it is fulfilling, but of course, the most fulfilling components come when you see that direct impact. And I am someone who loves connecting with people. I love talking to them. I love hearing what challenges they have. I like trying to come up with solutions for them. So I'm sure anyone feels positively about this, but I especially when I can have actual conversations with people and they share back with me, it can be the most meaningful thing in the world. I'll give you an example. We were lucky to speak with a group of apprentices, and in front of all of their colleagues, and these are people early in their labor-intensive careers, someone blurts out, "You guys are going to save lives with this." And while we know this intervention is only one piece of a much larger puzzle, and it itself is not single-handedly responsible for saving lives, it's such a hopeful comment. It's such an inspiring thing to hear, and it means there's motivation and there's optimism, and that's so huge. You can really lose sight of that when you're bogged down with devastating statistics and big numbers. Bringing the human component to it invaluable. And of course, we've also had the pleasure of speaking with a lot of thought leaders in this space. I've learned a lot. I've always looking to learn more. I think it's inspiring to see people working so hard to advocate. And it's truly, truly an honor to be working alongside them.
Wow, you hadn't shared that with me before, and that must have been a pretty special moment,
Yeah, it
for
really
someone to
was.
say that. It's, you know what I mean? It's a bleak outlook sometimes, and when that little drop of hope comes into the cup, it just kind of, it actually seems to go higher than that drop. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was really impressed with that person. That was a vulnerable thing to say.
Yeah, that's special. Awesome. I love that. Personal goals for you, Effie. So, I mean, we've talked a lot about the tool and a lot about the work because it is vital, it is timely. But I always make it a priority because it's important to me to really get to know who my guest is. And I'm sorry that we haven't had more time to talk about that because we're talking about this issue and you know so much about it. And I'm picking your brain on all of these things. But separate from your work on Level Up, what's next for you and what would you really like to accomplish? What's on your kind of bucket list of things that you really want to do when it comes professionally, personally, whatever it may be that comes to mind?
I love this question, Rachel. You've had me thinking about things that anyone should be thinking about. But one of my favorite pillar sayings in the public health space, or just well-being space, whatever you want to call it, is let's make the healthy choice the easy choice. And it sounds a little bit, no, it doesn't even sound corny. I take that back. I love that saying. And what I want to do, what is truly the most meaningful for me is helping to create mechanisms that make the healthy choice the easiest choice, whether that's generating more accountability for policymakers, to make the healthy choice the easy choice for their constituents. I just find that too often the onus for behavior change is on the individual when we know that so many structural factors go into our behaviors and our relationship with the world around us. So I get really enthusiastic about the power of data. That can be numbers and that can also be anecdotes to help advocate for that structural level change. And so I don't necessarily know what specific topic area that looks like. It doesn't even really need to look like one or the other, but anywhere where we can start to shift the focus on making the thing that's going to be best for someone the easiest thing for them to do, that's a huge win for me.
Well said. It's the work that Effie does is phenomenal. These are the people who are, putting the hammer to the nail, who are painting, who are, doing various work in forestry, doing the hard work to build and create and work with our resources to keep our economy moving. This is talent that we rely on heavily and we need to support. And so Level Up and Digital Public Square, Effie as the project manager of this, it's just incredibly timely and important. I know, Effie, that you work with a nonprofit, but I ask every guest at the end of the episode if there's one or two nonprofits that are close to their heart that they would like to highlight. So I'm wondering if you have a couple that you'd like to highlight today.
Yes, I have three. I
Sure.
have three I'd highlight. It's so hard to pick just one, and there's so many more. But I've been so impressed with the work of the Vancouver Island Construction Association. They've done a fabulous work with their Tailgate Toolkit program. They are absolute thought leaders in this space, and I'm very, very impressed with them. It's a resource we often go back to marvel at. Here locally, St. Stephen's House Community Organization, they recently hosted a big demonstration in light of their safe consumption site being one of the ones mandated to close here in Ontario. And it was just such a powerful display of community and the power of harm reduction and what it could do. I was so moved, and they're just a fabulous, fabulous group. And I want to highlight an organization based in Atlantic, Canada. It's Workforce Warriors. They were early supporters of this work. They were kind of in support even before we had funding approved for it. And they work specifically to provide equal opportunities for Indigenous people to participate in the Canadian economy while maintaining their culture and family structures. And they, understandably are big advocates for this issue and for doing everything we can to address it. So those are my three.
Okay, I will make sure to link to all three. They sound fantastic. I'll look into the three of them. I know the first. The second two I'll look into, but I'll link to all three so people can have a look at them online and learn more about them and donate if you can. Support them in any way that you can. Thank you, Effie, for taking the time to be here today. I look forward to seeing how Level Up continues to evolve and spreading the word, collaborating with you to, talk about this and to let people know how amazing this tool is. So thank you for taking the time today, Effie. I really do appreciate you and your work.
Thank you, Rachel. It's always such a pleasure to work with you, and we're so excited to see what we can build together.
Awesome. Take care, Effie. Thank you.
Be kind and truly connect. You're listening to Rachel Thexton Connects.